The plasma bolt that killed Corporal Jenkins left nothing but a smoking crater where his chest used to be. Sergeant Marcus Rivera rolled behind the twisted wreckage of their PC, his ears ringing from the explosion that had flipped their vehicle and scattered his squad across the rocky plateau. Through the acrid smoke, he could see Thompson's body twisted at an impossible angle, and Martinez. Christ, there wasn't enough left of Martinez to identify. Contact report. Rivera barked into his cum, but only static answered. The Corthic jamming was complete now. He was alone. The thunder of alien war machines grew closer, the distinctive whine of their hover tanks and the rhythmic thudding of their battle mechs. Rivera peered around the APC's burning hull and felt his stomach drop. The entire horizon was black with Corthic forces. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, their chitinous armor gleaming like oil in the alien sun. At the front of the horde, their shock troopers advanced in perfect formation, each one standing 8 feet tall with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Behind Rivera, barely 200 meters away, stretched the Kepler Canyon Bridge, humanity's greatest engineering achievement on this godforsaken world. The suspension bridge spanned a chasm so deep that atmospheric processors at the bottom looked like pinpricks of light. It was beautiful, elegant, and right now, it was the only thing standing between 50,000 human civilians and complete annihilation. Rivera's tactical display flickered to life for a moment before the jamming killed it again. But he'd seen enough. The evacuation convoy was still 3 hours out from the spaceport. 3 hours. He looked at his rifle, 47 rounds remaining. He looked at the alien army. The math was simple and terrifying. Well, shit, he muttered, checking his gear. 2 frag grenades, 1 plasma charge, a combat knife, and a half-empty canteen. Against an army dot, the smart play was to blow the bridge immediately. Cut off the invasion route, sacrifice himself, and hope the aliens couldn't find another way around the canyon system. But Rivera had spent 6 months on this world, had walked among those civilians, had seen their children playing in the settlement squares. 50,000 people who trusted him to get them home. 3 hours. He needed to buy them 3 hours. Rivera sprinted toward the bridge, his boots pounding against the metal grating as alien plasma fire began to rain down around him. The bridge was a marvel of human engineering, 2 kilometers long, suspended by massive cables over a chasm that dropped into the planet's molten core. The roadway was only wide enough for 2 vehicles, with maintenance walkways on either side, protected by chest-high barriers at the bridge's center. Rivera dropped to one knee and shouldered his rifle. The scope's rangefinder put the leading Corthac shock troopers at 800 meters. Well within range, but he needed to make this count. Every shot had to tell a story. The first alien to die never saw it coming. Rivera's bullet took its head clean off, the body tumbling forward in a spray of purple blood. The second shot dropped another trooper, and the third punched through the armor of what looked like an officer. The aliens immediately hit the dirt, seeking cover behind rocks and debris. Rivera smiled. Grimly. Good. Let them think there were more humans out here. He shifted position, moving to the bridge's eastern maintenance walkway. The canyon's acoustics were perfect. Every shot echoed and re-echoed off the rock walls, making it impossible to pinpoint his location. Rivera fired again, the bullet ricocheting off a boulder before finding its target. To the aliens, it would sound like crossfire from multiple positions. For 20 minutes, Rivera played the part of an entire squad. He moved constantly, using the bridge's support cables and maintenance platforms to change his firing position. The aliens advanced cautiously, clearly believing they faced a well-entrenched defensive position. Rivera's radio crackled occasionally with fragments of evacuation updates. Alpha moving to secondary route. Civilian. Transport 7 experiencing mechanical. Hour 1 passed. Rivera had expended 18 rounds and counted at least 12 confirmed kills. The aliens were getting smarter, though. They'd started using their dead as cover, building improvised barricades from their fallen comrades. Worse, Rivera could see movement on the canyon's far edges. Scout units trying to find alternate crossing points. That's when he got creative. Rivera pulled the pin on his first frag grenade. But instead of throwing it immediately, he counted to 3 before hurling it toward a cluster of aliens. The explosion sent rock fragments flying, but more importantly, it triggered a small avalanche on the canyon's eastern wall. Tons of loose stone crashed down, blocking one of the potential alternate routes the scouts were exploring. The aliens responded with their own explosives plasma mortar that turned sections of the plateau into glass. Rivera felt the bridge shudder under the bombardment, but the human engineers had built it to withstand seismic activity. It held. Hour 2 brought new challenges. The Korthak had brought up their heavy weapons, particle beam cannons that could punch through starship armor. Rivera watched in fascination as they set up their firing positions, clearly intending to simply blast the bridge to pieces. That couldn't happen. Not yet. Rivera had noticed something during his months on Kepler 442b. The aliens were methodical, almost ritualistic in their approach to warfare. They followed patterns, protocols. It was their strength and their weakness. He waited until the heavy weapons were almost in position, then fired a carefully aimed shot at the lead gunner. The alien dropped, and immediately, the entire crew stopped what they were doing to perform what looked like a funeral ritual over the body. Rivera used those precious minutes to relocate and set up his next surprise. The plasma charge from his demolitions kit wasn't meant to be used as a projectile, but Rivera had always been good at improvising. He rigged it to a piece of debris and used his rifle's grenade launcher to send it arcing toward the heavy weapons position. The explosion was spectacular, a miniature sun that vaporized 3 aliens and sent the others scrambling for cover. But Rivera's satisfaction was short-lived. Through his scope, he could see reinforcements arriving. Lots of them. And these weren't regular troops. These were Korthak berserkers, the aliens' shock assault specialists. They didn't follow protocols or perform rituals. They just killed everything in their path. Hour 3. Rivera's ammunition was running low. 19 rounds left. His water was gone, and his hands were starting to shake from exhaustion and adrenaline crash. The berserkers were advancing in a loose formation, using their natural agility to bound from cover to cover. They'd be at the bridge in minutes. Rivera made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed under normal circumstances. He started shooting to wound instead of kill. The first berserker took a bullet in the leg, dropping it but not killing it. Its anguished roars echoed across the canyon as it writhed in pain. The sound triggered something primal in the other berserkers. They stopped their advance to tend to their wounded comrade. Rivera put another round into a second alien's shoulder, then a third through another's abdomen. Within minutes, half the berserker pack was focused on caring for their wounded rather than advancing. It was a gamble based on Rivera's observation of alien behavior patterns, and it was paying off. The Korthak, for all their ferocity, seemed incapable of abandoning their injured, but Rivera knew it wouldn't last. Eventually they'd adapt. Eventually they'd overwhelm him through sheer numbers. He checked his watch. 6 hours and 37 minutes since the battle began. The evacuation convoy should be halfway to the spaceport by now. He just had to hold a little longer. The Shadow Claw assassins arrived without fanfare, materializing from the heat shimmer like deadly mirages. Rivera didn't see them, couldn't see them, but he felt them. The bridge cables sang a different tune when something that shouldn't exist walked across them. The metal grating whispered warnings under. Footsteps that made no sound. Rivera had been fighting for 6 hours and 12 minutes. When the first one tried to kill him, he was reloading behind the bridge's central support tower when his peripheral vision caught something impossible, a distortion in the air. Like looking through water. Rivera threw himself sideways, just as invisible claws raked the air where his head had been. He rolled, came up firing, and watched his bullets pass harmlessly through empty space. "Cloaking tech," he muttered, pressing his back against the support tower. Of course they have cloaking tech. The Korthek had finally gotten tired of losing soldiers to one stubborn human. They'd sent their elite killers, the Shadow Claws, assassins who'd never failed a mission, who could become invisible to both human eyes and most sensors. Rivera had heard stories about them in the briefings. Nightmare stories. A soft scraping sound made him spin left. Rifle raised. Nothing. But the sound came again from his right metal on metal, so faint it might have been the wind. Except there was no wind in the canyon. Rivera closed his eyes and listened. Really listened. The bridge was a symphony of sounds, creaking cables, settling metal, the distant rumble of the alien army. But underneath it all, he could hear something else, breathing. Not human breathing, something deeper, more rhythmic. And there was a smell, too, musky and alien, like wet leather mixed with ozone. The attack came from above. Rivera opened, his eyes just in time to see claws materializing inches from his face. He jerked backward, the razor-sharp talons missing his throat by millimeters. The Shadow Claw's camouflage flickered as it landed, revealing glimpses of midnight black chitin and burning yellow eyes before it vanished again. Rivera didn't try to track it. Instead, he did something the alien wouldn't expect. He ran toward the edge of the bridge and vaulted over the safety barrier. The maintenance cables that supported the bridge's structure formed a complex web beneath the main roadway. Rivera had studied the engineering schematics during the long months of garrison duty, memorizing every strut and support beam out of boredom. Now that knowledge might save his life, he swung hand over hand along a primary support cable, his rifle slung across his back. Behind him, he heard the Shadow Claw's confusion, a chittering sound that might have been alien cursing. The assassin had expected him to cower and die, not turn the bridge itself into a three-dimensional battlefield. Rivera reached a junction where three cables met and wrapped, his legs around the intersection. From here, he could see the entire underside of the bridge, a maze of steel and carbon fiber that stretched into the misty depths of the canyon. He unslung his rifle and waited. The first Shadow Claw made the mistake of following him onto the cables. Rivera couldn't see it, but he could feel the vibrations through the steel, a rhythmic swaying that told him exactly where the alien was. He aimed at a point 6 feet ahead of the disturbance and fired. The bullet struck something solid. Purple blood materialized in midair, spattering the cable as the wounded Shadow Claw's camouflage failed. The alien hung there for a moment, its forearms scrabbling for purchase on the slick metal, before gravity claimed it. Rivera watched it fall into the abyss, its death scream echoing off the canyon walls. "One down," he whispered. The second assassin was smarter. It stayed on the main bridge, forcing Rivera to come to it. But Rivera had other ideas. He pulled his last frag grenade from his belt and studied the bridge's structure above him. The humans had built redundancy into every system. If one cable failed, others would compensate. But if the right cable failed at the right time, Rivera climbed to where a secondary support cable attached to the main roadway. The connection point was a massive steel joint, designed to flex with the bridge's movement. He wedged the grenade between two support struts, pulled the pin, and swung away as fast as he could. The explosion was smaller than he'd hoped, but the effect was dramatic. A 20-foot section of the bridge's eastern walkway collapsed, taking part of the roadway with it. The Shadow Claw, caught in the collapse, flickered in and out of visibility as its camouflage system struggled with the debris impacts. Rivera saw his chance. He swung up through the gap in the roadway, coming up behind the disoriented alien. His combat knife found the gap between armor plates at the base of the creature's skull. The Shadow Claw convulsed once and went still. 2 down. But the third. One was already moving. Rivera felt the cable. vibrate beneath his feet, and threw himself flat just as invisible. Claws swept through the space where he'd been standing. This one was different, older, more experienced. It didn't make the mistakes of its packmates. For 10 minutes, they played a deadly game of cat and mouse among the bridge's superstructure. The Shadow Claw would attack from one direction, while Rivera tried to anticipate its movements. His rifle was useless at close range, so he relied on his knife and his knowledge of the bridge's layout. The alien was faster, stronger, and nearly invisible. But Rivera had something it didn't: desperation, born of protecting 50,000 innocent lives. Every time the Shadow Claw thought it had him cornered, Rivera found a new escape route through the maintenance tunnels or along the cable arrays. The breakthrough came when Rivera realized the alien's weakness. The Shadow Claw's camouflage was perfect, but it couldn't mask its interaction with the environment. When it stepped on loose debris, the fragments still moved. When it brushed against cables, they still vibrated. Rivera began using the bridge itself as a sensor array. He scattered loose bolts and metal fragments across key walkways, creating an early warning system. When the debris moved without visible cause, he knew where the alien was. The final confrontation happened on the bridge's central span. Rivera had rigged a trap using maintenance cables and a section of damaged railing. When the Shadow Claw triggered his improvised snare, the cables tightened around something invisible, revealing the outline of the struggling assassin. Rivera didn't hesitate. He emptied his rifle's remaining ammunition into the trapped alien, watching purple blood bloom in the air as the bullets found their mark. The Shadow Claw's camouflage failed completely as it died, revealing a creature of terrible beauty: sleek black armor, 4 arms ending in razor claws, and eyes like burning coals. As the third assassin's body hit the bridge deck, Rivera heard something that chilled his blood: slow, deliberate applause echoing across the canyon. He looked up to see the Korthek army had stopped its advance. In the distance, a new figure stood among the alien ranks. Even at this distance, Rivera could see it was massive, easily twice the size of the regular troops. His radio crackled to life for a brief moment. Cutting through the jamming, evacuation 70% complete. Estimate 45 minutes to full extraction. 45 minutes. Rivera checked his ammunition: empty. His grenades gone. His knife was chipped and bloody, and his hands shook from exhaustion. He'd been fighting for 8 hours and 37 minutes. The massive figure in the distance began walking toward the bridge, and the entire alien army parted before it like a sea. Rivera didn't need intelligence briefings to know what he was looking at. Warlord Dekara herself was coming to finish this. Rivera smiled grimly and drew his combat knife. 45 minutes. He just had to last 45 more minutes against a creature that had personally killed more humans than some entire battalions. "Come on then," he whispered to the approaching Warlord. "Let's dance." Warlord Dekara crossed the plateau like a force of nature made flesh. She stood 12 feet tall, her obsidian armor crackling with personal energy shields that had deflected orbital bombardments. 4 massive arms ended in claws that could rend starship hull plating, and her elongated skull bore the ritual scars of 1,000 victories. She had killed entire human battalions in single combat, had personally executed 3 colonial governors, and had never not once been wounded by human weapons. Rivera watched her approach and felt something break inside his chest. Not his spirit that had been forged into unbreakable steel over the past 8 hours. What broke was his last connection to sanity, to the careful tactical thinking that had kept him alive this long. 43 minutes until full evacuation. 43 minutes to hold a bridge against a living legend of alien warfare. Sergeant Marcus Rivera, Dekara's voice boomed across the canyon, translated by her suit's speakers into perfect English. "I know your name now. My Shadow Claws spoke it as they died." Rivera said nothing. He stood at the bridge's center, his chipped combat knife held loosely in his right hand, his left gripping a maintenance cable for balance. His uniform was torn and bloody, his face streaked with alien gore and human sweat. "You have fought well, little human," the warlord continued, stepping onto the bridge. Each footstep made the entire structure vibrate. "Better than your species deserves. I offer you a warrior's death quick and clean. Kneel, and I will make it painless." Rivera's response was to spit blood onto the bridge deck. "Counter-offer," he called back. "Go fuck yourself." Thekara's laugh was like grinding stone. "I had hoped you would say that." She charged at Rivera had faced the impossible before, but this was beyond impossible. This was mythological. Thekari moved with liquid grace despite her massive size, her energy shields flaring as they automatically deflected the bridge's metal debris kicked up by her passage. Rivera threw himself sideways as her first claw. Swipe carved a groove in the bridge deck where he'd been standing. He couldn't fight her. Not directly. But as she spun to track his movement, Rivera's engineer-trained mind began cataloging details. The way her shields flickered when they deflected solid objects. The rhythm of her footsteps. The harmonic frequency of the bridge cables under her weight. An insane idea began to form. Rivera sprinted toward the bridge's eastern support tower, Thekara in pursuit. Her claws missed his head by inches, carving sparks from the metal railing. At the tower, Rivera grabbed a maintenance wrench from an emergency kit and hurled it at the warlord's face. The shields deflected it easily, but the impact made them flare brighter. "You cannot hurt me, human," Thekara snarled, advancing slowly now, savoring the hunt. "My shields have withstood your species' most powerful weapons." Rivera was already moving, his mind racing through engineering calculations. Bridge resonance frequency, cable tension ratios, harmonic amplification. "Maybe," he panted, reaching the western support tower. "But I don't need to hurt you." He began shooting the bridge cables, not randomly. Rivera had memorized the bridge's structural specifications during months of boredom. He knew exactly which cables to hit in exactly the right sequence. His rifle was empty, but the tower's emergency kit contained a plasma cutter for maintenance work. The first cable snapped with a sound like thunder. The bridge shuddered but held. Thekara paused, confused by this apparent act of suicide. The second cable parted, and the bridge began to sway. "What are you doing?" the warlord demanded. Rivera cut the third cable and felt the bridge's harmonic frequency shift. The entire structure was now vibrating at a specific resonance, a frequency he'd calculated based on Thekara's weight, her shield harmonics, and the bridge's natural oscillation patterns. "Turning you into a tuning fork," Rivera replied. Cutting the fourth cable. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Thekara's energy shields, designed to deflect kinetic impacts and energy weapons, began resonating with the bridge's vibrations. The harmonic feedback created a standing wave that amplified with each oscillation. Her shields flickered, sparked, and began to fail. "Impossible," she breathed, staggering as the resonance disrupted her balance. Rivera dropped the plasma cutter and charged. Without her shields, Thekara was still faster and stronger than any human, but she was also disoriented by the harmonic disruption. Rivera's tackle caught her off guard, sending both of them crashing to the swaying bridge deck. What followed was the most brutal 30 seconds of Rivera's life. Thekara's claws raked across his back, opening wounds that would have killed a lesser man. Her lower arms grabbed his throat while her upper arms tried to tear his head off. But Rivera had spent 8 hours learning to fight beyond human limits. And desperation gave him strength he didn't know he possessed. He drove his knee into the gap between her armor plates, felt something crack. His elbow found the nerve cluster at the base of her skull, a weak point he'd noticed when fighting the Shadow Claws. Thekara's grip loosened for just a moment, and Rivera twisted free. They rolled across the swaying bridge, trading blows that would have shattered concrete. Rivera's knife found the joint in her shoulder armor, drawing purple blood. The caress claws opened his cheek to the bone. The bridge groaned and swayed beneath them, its damaged cable singing in the wind. The end came suddenly. Thecare managed to pin Rivera beneath her massive weight, her claws poised to tear out his throat. But in her fury, she'd forgotten about the bridge's instability. As she raised her arms for the killing blow, the structure lurched violently to one side. Thecare lost her balance, rolling toward the bridge's edge. Rivera, acting on pure instinct, grabbed her arm not to save her, but to use her momentum. As she went over the side, he held on, letting her weight pull him to his feet. Then, with the last of his strength, he drove his combat knife between her armor plates, finding the gap that led to her primary heart. Thecara's eyes widened in shock. You cannot. I am eternal, yeah? Rivera gasped, twisting the knife. Well, I'm human. We specialize in killing things that think they're eternal. The Warlord's grip on the bridge edge weakened. She fell, her massive form tumbling into the abyss, her death scream echoing off the canyon walls until distance swallowed it. Rivera collapsed to his knees, his body finally acknowledging the damage it had sustained. Blood ran from dozens of wounds, his vision blurred, and his hands shook uncontrollably. But through the pain, he heard the most beautiful sound in the universe, his radio crackling to life. All stations, this is evacuation control. Final transport is away. Repeat, all civilians are clear. Kepler colony evacuation is complete. Rivera looked at his watch. 9 hours, 17 minutes, and 38 seconds since the battle began. He'd done it. 50,000 people were safe. With trembling hands, he reached for the detonator he'd rigged to the bridge supports at the very beginning. The Korthik army was already advancing, enraged by their warlord's death. But they were too late. This is Sergeant Marcus Rivera, he spoke into his radio. Mission accomplished. Bridge is coming down. He pressed the detonator. The explosion was beautiful, a chain of fire that raced along the bridge's length, severing cables and supports in perfect sequence. As the structure collapsed into the canyon, taking the invasion route with it, Rivera allowed himself one last smile. He'd held the bridge for 9 hours. And when the alien warlord herself came, he'd sent her straight to hell. Not bad for one stubborn human.